All right, hello everyone. So today we're just going to be showing off some of those new IMU changes. Um, there's been quite a bit of rework done that I'm pretty excited to show off. Um, of course, I have not been developing these changes, but I have been sort of quality assurance testing, bug testing, seeing if I can the break the new changes and see how it goes basically. So I'm just loading up the sim right now, and we're gonna check out the newest batch on stream, as well as go over some of the stuff which I have been having the privilege to test earlier. So um, yeah, we'll hop right in just a moment while I'm loading up the save. All right, here we go. Got video connected. Push that out to the stream now. All right, just waiting for that final load. Yep, right when it gets to the end. It always takes the longest. And we got sound. Good. And we got video. Good. State is going to take just a little bit to load, so we'll let it go ahead. And there she is. All right, let's just figure out where we are real quick. Perfect. Okay. That's pretty much exactly where I wanted us to be. $0.90. All right, so it looks stable even when using save states, so that's pretty good. We're gonna go ahead and just wait a few more minutes. We just started the stream, so we'll let whoever's gonna come in. And how long has it been since the start? 13 minutes? Yeah, we'll start in about 2 or 3 minutes. Alright, we're gonna go ahead and get on with the show. So, the first thing I wanted to test is this update is supposed to push a new auto maneuver. So, I have been testing, of course, most of the IMU functions a few days ago, but just recently, yesterday, there was an update pushed out for a new auto maneuver sequence. So I would like to try out, let's go to 90, so 090. And then here, let's go to 120. And let's go to 330. D18, there she goes. And let's see how she behaves. Now notice, our pitch, yaw, and roll all have kind of different rates. So I'm very excited to see how this is going to be. Before, it was that the needles all crossed at different times, and we were pulsing up and down quite a bit with auto maneuver. And so I do see a slight bit of a change here with the auto maneuver sequence. However, it does look like we are still bouncing around pretty significantly. And I'll show you what I think it is. Oh, and look at that. Pitch and yaw, these stop bouncing around. That is pretty good. So the impulse is getting there. And this is interesting, that we began to slow down without any jet fire, which was kind of interesting. The Apollo spacecraft doesn't have any reaction wheels or anything like that, or any gyroscopes. Reaction wheels kind of sci-fi. Any gyroscopic device to make it stabilize, so we shouldn't be slowing down. However, I do just want to show off what I think is causing the issue. So we'll go to CMC free, and we will begin a pitch up, like so, and now we'll begin a roll. So a pitch and a roll should make us have a stable attitude. We should follow along this line even whilst rolling. However, we can see that much like a fish swimming in the water or an airplane in the air, our pitch is attached straight to our head. So as we're turning, we are pitching in the direction we turn, which of course is not supposed to be that way. You know, our pitch is, as soon as we start rolling, supposed to convert into yaw, and as we continue rolling, back into pitch. So we should just follow this straight line all the way up, even while spinning. So that's one thing which it looks like they did improve the, or Petrie did improve the auto maneuver logic itself. So we're not getting as bad of thruster fire as we were before. However, I think that this in particular, and if we had a trace on the ball, like a tracing on the ball to show this plot, I think that this is the crux of the issue with that verb 49 auto maneuver routine. And modeling this is going to be quite a difficult ask because, of course, NASP has this done automatically by Orbiter. However, right now we can see there is sort of non-Newtonian physics here at play. We're moving in the direction we're facing, as opposed to in the direction in which we put in velocity. So this is an issue, and it is non-Newtonian, so it does need to get addressed. However, it's not anything game-breaking. It is something that is going to probably confuse a lot of people, and it's going to take some getting used to. So if this could get patched, it would significantly help the player base, in my opinion. And it is space, so it operates on Newtonian physics. So it should be that we would, should have kept driving along that 120-degree line, even whilst spinning. Taking a look now, one of the things that I found was a much needed improvement that is added is the roll position indicator. So here we can see that no longer is it actually tied to acceleration in pitch and yaw. It's purely tied to roll now, so this indicator is not gonna bounce around and go in a way that doesn't make sense. It's in one sense or another physically transfixed upon the yaw 0 mark, which gives us an accurate roll representation. Even if we were to sort of yaw out of plane, we can see that irregardless, that roll position indicator, it is right on the money. Right when we pass 0 roll, we will be at 0 roll. And even to further show that, we can pull up a verb 16 noun 20 and see we are about to hit that 0 roll on the outer gimbal. And bam, there is 0 on the outer gimbal, and the roll position indicator just passed the 0. So this makes operating the spacecraft much, much more simple. Reading this ball without an actual number to attach to these ticks around did make piloting the spacecraft on SCS or CMC free a little bit challenging for new people. However, now it's very simple: 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, and so on. Und so weiter und so fort. We just passed 90 degrees, and it is right on the money. So this is a huge improvement in terms of our position indications. We'll go back to hold. And you can see we do, our hold will engage the attitude hold logic right when we flip the switch. And then the auto maneuvering system will bring us right back to where we were when we flip that hold. So that's great. And when we flip between auto and hold, we can see we're not bouncing anywhere. We're not going around. As a matter of fact, if I queue up verb 49 and I get us to that 0 and then 0, 90, and 0, and I maneuver right to 0, 90, 0, and you can see even now the auto maneuver logic has chosen the correct way to roll the spacecraft. So it's not choosing to go the long way around or anything. So this is really good. Right when we're back and stable on 090, we'll go and we'll switch to hold, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, we can see it looks like that auto maneuver logic is really good. It is just that the logic is sort of expecting our yaw to become pitch as we're rolling, and it's not. So what the logic has to do is it has to keep zeroing out. It has to keep basically stable. Like it's got to keep zeroing out that pitch as we're coming through, because we were sort of at the pitch when we were rolled 90. When we were rolled 90, we were at the pitch because that yaw, that middle gimbal, became basically our yaw at that point when we're rolled 90. And as we're rolling, that is supposed to gradually transition into yaw velocity, and yaw to position into pitch velocity, and it's not doing that. So the auto maneuver logic is good, aside from the final rate seems to do that weird thing where it damps without RCS fire and has to speed up. So once that Newtonian physics sort of gets ironed out, and we do get that singular direction of velocity, our velocity vector added in properly, that auto maneuver logic will be solidified, and I think really it's going to be a done deal. At that point, we shouldn't even need to touch verb 49 anymore, except maybe ironing out just a few little kinks in the system, like you saw how that roll was slowing down and speeding up. But let's go back to hold and check that out. Look at that. Like in real life, when the computer flashes verb 50 noun 18, that sets the hold flag within the computer's logic. So now when we go between auto and hold, the spacecraft will no longer want to drive us back to that auto attitude. As a matter of fact, even with this display up right now, if we were to maneuver away from that zone, let's get ourselves about 5 degrees out of plane. Right? And we go back to auto. Ooh. Ooh, okay. That was working. That was working yesterday. So that is a thing that needs to get repatched. Let's go back to hold. Let's go significantly out of plane here. Let's stabilize. Back to auto. Ah, okay. So here it worked when the display was cleared. Okay, so that is something that's new. That was not happening yesterday. That's something that I will just post about. So I can say I've checked out the new auto maneuver logic, and it looks great. There is one funny thing. The last gimbal to get into attitude sort of slows down and then speeds up. And it slows down without RCS fire. Like damping is using a gyroscopic damper. So aside from that, it's pretty good. I think the last few odds and ends with that are the non-Newtonian motion, i.e. when pitching in CMC free, and then rolling in CMC free after pitch is stopped, or after pitch has stopped being commanded, pitch rate should become yaw rate as the roll is occurring. This is because the velocity vector does not change position. How it is modeled now is like a plane or a fish in water, which obviously is not how a vacuum is supposed to behave. Hello, hello. Lastly, it was working previous updates. However, this time when verb 50, noun 18 is flashing after the verb 49 auto maneuver is complete, that should set the hold flag. Even if the astronaut goes in to CMC hold and maneuvers, the going back to auto should not make the spacecraft drive back to the auto attitude. This is correct when the display is dismissed with enter. However, if the flashing 5018 is still up, it does maneuver back into attitude. If the astronaut puts in controller input while in CMC auto, or switches to CMC hold, the hold flag is supposed to be set in the computer, which would force the verb 49 routine to flash 5018. Yes, hello, Caden. How's it going? How's it going, NCAT? We're just doing some testing, some bug reporting. You want to see what's up, what's new? Because there is a lot to show you. A lot of good changes. There is something that was fixed and then was sort of now is like half fixed again. Just an update with the verb 49 logic. I think he may have misinterpreted what I was saying earlier, and he had to correct on the previous update he pushed out to me. But this update, it got just half broken. Like, it works mostly, but in some instances it does not. Yeah, unfortunately, reentry cannot use the traditional AGC code because that would require simulations of the physical hardware, which is definitely probably out of scope for this type of project. But here, I can show you exactly what has changed. If we come up to verb 16, noun 20, we can see our IMU is perfectly matching the 1620 here. Let's call up a verb 49 real quick, and then let's get back into that 090 attitude. And we can see here, yeah, there's this weird damping effect that's got to get fixed. But look at that. Pitch and yaw get into this attitude at exactly the same time. That is really what we want to see. If all three of those can get into the attitude at the same time, in most instances, that is the perfectly modeled auto maneuver. because this thing traces the path along the ball. It's like, I need to do this, and it path traces along the ball. And so it'll draw between this attitude and maybe this attitude, and it will path trace along that. What is sort of not working anymore, which was working previously, is if we switch to hold and we just come out of plane a little bit. Let's say that looks pretty good. Now we'll let go. With this display up, when we go back to auto, it drives us back to that auto attitude. This flashing 5018 means that the hold flag is set. So even if we go to auto, it should hold at the current attitude. Whereas if we dismiss this display now, and we do go to hold, and we let go, and we go back to auto, we can see now this is working properly now. So before, it would have always driven you back to auto no matter what, even if you dismiss the display. Now it is a lot better. However, that 5018 is supposed to be the hold flag. So no matter what mode you're in on the CMC, except for free, you'll be in as if it was in CMC hold. We can start this, and let's tap, and we can see, yeah, none of our controller inputs work on auto. In real life, any controller input would make 5018 start flashing, and for the hold logic to be set, and for the crew to be able to maneuver the spacecraft by controller, even in CMC auto. You mentioned at N9 that I was working directly with Petrie to fix some issues, and he seemed excited. Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, so here's another thing I wanted to show off. Here, check this out. Let's give ourselves a little bit of roll action. Look at that. Look at that. We do have some jittery gimbal here. I wonder where that's coming from. And we can even see just how accurate this is. So we now have a fully functioning roll position indicator. There you go. And even if we were to become out of plane, from that sort of 0-degree yaw mark, look at that. It's still perfectly on the money. So that is really, really good stuff. What I was showing off, though, is something that I think is a bit of an issue, which is if we drive back to 090, I can show this off a little bit better. We can see we're not supposed to be able to enter 6018 while on CMC free. That's another thing. We are not supposed to be able to enter CMC, or we're not supposed to be able to enter 0618 while on CMC free in verb 49. So there is something I want to demonstrate, but in order to demonstrate that, I would need to have to load up NASP. I would have to be able to load that up into NASP. So there's just something that I really want to demonstrate. that I think is a really confusing concept to explain. Like, what do I mean when I say that pitch becomes yaw when you're rolling? That doesn't make any sense. But really, if you think about it, it does. And so I'll show you what reentry does as soon as we're in this attitude, and I'm going to see if you can pick up on why this is an issue. So once we're in attitude, let's start with the demonstration. All right, here we are. We're in attitude. To enter there, let's go CMC free, right? We're not committing to any auto maneuver, any auto logic, any of this stuff. We will engage a pitch rate. Okay? We're pitching. All right? So at this point, would you agree that we're just pitching, right? There will be no yaw. Okay? Would you agree that if we sat this out, we're going to stay more or less in this sort of orientation while the numbers are coming down? Right? You would agree with that assessment? Nothing would change if I did anything that wasn't yawing. Okay? Like nothing would change here. If I just didn't touch pitch, we would still be pitching, right? Okay? You would agree? Yeah? Let's input some roll. Now, would you agree that if I were to roll right now, that this would not induce yaw? We would stay perfectly on this 0 degrees yaw line. Would you agree? Okay, you would agree. All right, let's roll. All right, now I stop, I let go. Now watch what happens. I'm not yawing. I haven't touched yaw. I've only touched pitch. But look, we are only pitching. And so the issue is that the velocity vector isn't tied to, it's not tied to the direction you thrusted in. It's actually tied to the position of the spacecraft itself. So when we have our pitch velocity vector and we roll, our pitch velocity vector is directly tied to the spacecraft. Instead, as we're rolling through 90 degrees, that pitch velocity vector needs to transition slowly as we're going from 0 to 90, from 90 to 270. That needs to transition from pitch to yaw, back to pitch, back to yaw, back to pitch as we keep rolling. So this is not a center of mass issue. Because if I were to pull up a debug and I were to trace this path out, you would see that this is very obviously not a center of mass issue. The issue is that the velocity vectors are directly tied to the attitude of the spacecraft. Here we go. We're hitting our gimbal lock position. This is another change that I really like. Even though gimbal lock is not supposed to be modeled in reentry, there is, you know, Euclidean physics at play here. So whilst gimbal lock is not supposed to be modeled in reentry, there is the chance that you do gimbal lock at yaw 90 and yaw 270. So because of that chance, even though it's not supposed to, I have requested that the gimbal lock light do be turned on. Even if it's not intentionally modeled, gimbal lock may happen, and that's if you don't simulate that fourth gimbal. And there is an option in Unity to not have gimbal lock on objects themselves, not just like spacecraft kind of gimbal lock. I mean, on the physical Unity objects themselves, there is a way to not have gimbal lock. However, it seems that for whatever reason, even with that option enabled, there was still some instances in which gimbal lock was occurring. And so I requested the gimbal lock light to be enabled. Just because even if it's a chance, right, even if it's a small chance, it should still be warned to the operator that it is a chance nonetheless. So yeah, that's a new thing that got implemented that I've thoroughly enjoyed. So those are sort of the biggest changes, really, and quite frankly, I think the number one best change so far in the entire history of reentry is our gimbals. Let's sort of get a little yaw out of the way, and let's just pitch through this and just watch the behavior of that yaw and that pitch gimbal as we're yawing and pitching around. Avoiding gimbal lock, of course. But let's just watch it. Look at that. That's single-handedly the best work in reentry history, in my opinion, right there. Because with the old implementation of the logic, doing that has got to have been a really difficult challenge for a solo dev to have that behave in such a way. Amazing work. Here, we'll just use our debug stop button. Yeah. Anything you wanted to test out? Any sort of recommendations? I did sort of show off. I don't know if you were here when we were doing that, but if we set, let's drive back to 090. I'm just sort of choosing that because it's our PTC attitude, so it's very easy to remember. You can see we enter 6018. For whatever reason, if we do go hold, we do hold. However, that hold flag... Oh, that hold flag was set into the computer. Okay, that's great. It is supposed to be set right away, though. But it was eventually. You can see, though, that even with that hold flag set, we've auto-maneuvered back into the attitude. And that's not right. It is supposed to hold the attitude, even with this display up. So that's something that's always been a little interesting. Yeah, yeah. I hear you. I hear you. It's been a while for me too, but I've always been in NASP, so I don't need to start from square zero. But yeah, no, this is something like with these changes alone, I would be greenlit to start all of my series, which I put on hold because of the attitude problems. With these changes alone, we're greenlit to finish up Astronaut Bootcamp. We're greenlit to continue and finish our one checklist at a time series. And we're greenlit to use reentry in the way that I intended to for our the Voyages series for Gemini and Mercury. But yeah, we could see if we maneuver out of this attitude and we let go and we go back to auto, right? This is how it sort of used to behave, which is not correct. How it's supposed to behave, and you can see when we have turned off the display, when we hit enter to terminate that routine, we go back to hold, back to auto. You know, we are able to sort of maneuver in the way that we want. Now, what is interesting is the auto logic is doing some damping all the time, which is interesting. It is kind of a little bit of an issue. It's puffing a lot of gas when it should sound like that, exactly like that. So the hold logic is great. The auto logic is weird. And we can see this is behaving exactly as it should now. So that's good. Yeah. Any questions about the whole shtick here? Really some great work that's gone in. It needs a couple of you know, it needs a couple of passes through the fine-tooth comb. We can see it is a marked, significant improvement over the previous logic. And you can see I've actually been testing this extensively because we have left the 100% RCS mark, which is absolutely unheard of. Like, that never happens to anyone. Also weird that we have a slightly lower fuel pressure than normal. Oh, it's because I forgot to turn on the the heaters for the RCS. That's my bad. But yeah. So you can see I've been testing this extensively because woo, yeah, leaving the 100% mark on reentry is something that never really happens. Yeah, we're going through fine-tooth comb. I'm just doing this because a lot of people are like, "Where have you been?" And sort of viewership has dropped off. Watch time hours are still up, but the viewership and the sort of increase in subscribers has dipped below the average that we've sort of been coasting on for a while. So just letting people know like where the hell I've been, what I've been up to, sort of behind the scenes, helping out. So these little nitpicky things, this right away is good enough to just push to the public, in my opinion. But these little nitpicky things, these last things, are going to make the Apollo experience more intuitive for the people flying. When people fly in space, they expect Newtonian physics. They don't expect airplane physics or fish physics or submarine physics. They expect our Newtonian vacuum physics. So our velocity vectors should not be tied to the attitude of the spacecraft. They should be tied to the acceleration of the spacecraft. So that's something that hopefully will get addressed. It's going to be really complicated. It's going to be a complete overhaul in the engine for all three spacecraft. Quite frankly, every last one of them has this issue. So it will be a significant undertaking. But for Apollo, I think it's the most important because I never noticed it in Mercury and Gemini until I started going through Apollo with the fine-tooth comb. But I really noticed it in Apollo because the ball is such an integral part of the experience of Apollo. Like 90% of the time, you're sat here staring at this flight ball. And so if it's not perfect, people will notice. And it is really, people expect Newtonian vacuum physics. So it's actually harder to have something which is modeled more simplistic in this regard. Hello. Hello, Sherry. How's it going? But yeah, I think the changes that have been made, they're seriously, seriously good stuff. Like I cannot even stress this. Absolutely amazing work. So yeah, if there's anything you think I should do to stress test these new changes. Oh my gosh, I completely forgot to show something off. Holy smokes. We're gonna do that in just a moment. I'm just gonna take a small little break, and because I've been rambling on, and we're gonna show off the I think the second most critical change on this. So we're gonna show that off in a bit, but I'm just gonna go ahead and take just a small little break. Anyway, Sherry, hello and welcome to the chat. All right. All right. Let me show you something pretty cool. Let's engage a little pitch. Let's go CMC free to do this. Let's engage a little pitch. Let's engage a little roll. And now let's time accelerate. And check this out. That's right. Look at this beauty. And yeah, when we do sort of go back to 1 times speed, there is a little bit of catching up that it needs to do. However, you can see that even though it needed to catch up, the display after catching up is still 100% accurate. And better yet, let's go verb 49 and let's maneuver back to that attitude. And let's go just hit that button. So we can see that in auto maneuver, it is maybe still not going to work the slightest just because it cannot change rates under time interpolation. But, you know, that's okay. So now, like, in PTC, we'll still actually have a rolling spacecraft in PTC. It's not just going to stay fixed as soon as you start, you know, your PTC roll. So let's simulate that. Let's simulate a PTC. Very basic PTC. And we can see when we do enter time acceleration, we go with it. And it is pretty powerful. Only thing is, yeah, the ball has to catch up at some point. But it is really not that big an issue. Like, who's really gonna time skip that fast? Anyways, unless they're, you know, sort of going in the old transit. So it's pretty solid. I can't find any flaws with it, other than, yeah, it does need to catch up. Just smooth motion kind of slows the ball down. But look, it does catch up and it does show the right attitude afterwards, so I'm not complaining. So yeah. Everything's working good. And that's 1620. That's the biggest thing. So the last thing is just getting the Newtonian physics and getting this correct. This switching with the verb 49 display still up. As well, controller inputs in CMC Auto should set the hold flag on the computer as well. So the whole logic with the flashing 5018, that needs to just get fixed up. And once that's done, it's perfect. It's complete, is ready to go to the public, shipped off. I expect at the current work rate of these IMU changes, I expect maybe about a week or two. We are talking about a little bit of an engine change here, but just to these points took only 2 or 3 days to get in their first phase, and an additional day to get in the second sort of testing phase that I have. But just for the sake of if Petrie watches this video when he wakes up in a few hours, let's load up Orbiter and let me show you what I mean when I say that we've got non-Newtonian physics. So I'm going to be, you know, right back. I'm going to transition everything. We're going to load up Orbiter, and then I'll show you what the proper physics are for these velocity vectors. So I'll be right back. Okay, my apologies, but it is taking a little bit of time for orbiter to load. Just giving me another second or two. And that is a figurative second or two, not a literal second or two. All right, we're in. We're in. Let me just, there we go, set that up, link the video, and there we are. All right, so let's show off what I mean when I mean non-Newtonian physics. Firstly, real quick, let us just navigate to 0270 real quick. Here, check this out. When we do make a controller input, you can see, bam, hold logic is set, and the spacecraft holds. Additionally, when we go into hold, bam, hold logic is set, and the spacecraft holds. And when we go back into auto, the spacecraft does not maneuver again until we hit proceed. So that is the simple way of fixing that. Super easy, super basic thing. Just, yeah, that is the super basic thing that can be fixed like within a day, probably, at his work rate on these IMU things so far. Let's go ahead and let's get into our position for this demonstration. Okay. So let's go CMC free. And we all agree that in CMC free, the spacecraft will have no authority over its attitude, only the astronaut's controller inputs. So let's just, purely for the sake of debug and everything, we are going to activate kill rotation. We're going to completely kill our rotation. Okay? We're no longer moving. In fact, let's actually perfectly get us up to that 0 degrees roll as best we can. And then we will use the debug option for killing rotation again. So there's no velocity in any yaw. Let's put some pitch. Put some pitch in. Oh, hello. I think I still have kill rotation enabled on accident. I do. There we go. All right, so let's put some pitch in. Okay. Let's stabilize out. Here, let's go like this. Let's put pitch in, and we'll stabilize out yaw as we pitch. Okay. So yaw has been stabilized. Now check out what happens when we put in some roll. And we stop that. Here, actually, I've got to demonstrate this in a bit of a better way. The SCS is, of course, fighting this naturally. So we need to demonstrate this a little bit better. Kind of can get a little bit tricky to set this up. you know, with the SCS fight new and everything. All right, so here we go. We are going to command pitch. Yaw is stabilized. Yaw to Excel command. Spacecraft has no control over anything. We will all in Excel command, no control over anything related to the jets. We will now input roll and watch this transition. We'll go 5-1 just to accentuate this. So we can see we do have a little bit of an offset center of mass. So we are driving away. However, we're not, as you can see, our velocity is not tied to the direction of the spacecraft. We're very clearly slipping out in a direction which we're not facing, which was not apparent in reentry. In reentry, it was very obvious that we were slipping out in a direction which the spacecraft was always facing. And in this way, you know, we can slip out in a direction which we're not facing. Like, we're moving this way. We're not moving this way. We're not moving this way. We're not moving this way. We're drifting in a direction which is not sort of where we were pointing. And that's what needs to get changed. So we'll run that demonstration again. We'll completely stabilize out. And as before, we'll kill our rotation. So we're completely stable. We will engage, and even so, let's actually accentuate, let's exaggerate. We'll engage a pitch up. Yaw is stabilized as best as the spacecraft can stabilize it. We can see we're following this line pretty closely. Now let's go CMC free. We agree the spacecraft has no control over its attitude, aside from astronaut inputs. Now let's roll. So we can see we do have that sort of offset center of mass. However, it's very apparent that when we subtract that factor, we would just drift along this line. And we practically almost are. No inputs, and our pitch just became yaw. And our yaw is now becoming pitch. So that's what we mean when we say just a little bit better Newtonian physics. I think that that is going to make everything just a little bit more intuitive for everyone. So I think that's all I wanted to showcase today. So I hope everyone has a good night. And with that, I'll go, you know, submit this in to Petrie. A little bit of feedback for him. And yeah. We can see the direction that reentry is going is a pretty good direction. Just those two little things. That's it. So thanks for stopping by. If you're wondering where I've been, that's where we've been. Helping out Petrie, doing some bug testing, some quality assurance testing. And with that, I'll let you all go. And thanks for flying with us.